Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. It's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and these are the hottest Silver Age comics for the week. I'm flying solo. I usually do this show with my good friend Mark Olroyd from Suddenly Comics, but today I'm doing it by myself, and we're only going to do 5 books this week, but they're great books, and there's a lot of stuff that we can learn from these books. So the first is number 5 on the list is Action Comics number 252. This is a book from 1959. It's a Kirk Swan and Al Palestino cover. It's the first appearance of Kara Zor-El, which is known as Supergirl, and it's also Metallo's first appearance and his death. So it's a major book for DC. There was a recent movie with this character. However, with all that being said, this book was the steal of the week because there was a 6.0 that came up from on Heritage, and it was restored 6.0, so it is restored, but it was moderately professional restoration, and like there was clever reglossing, pieces added, slight color touch. Those were the restoration notes. And it sold for $1,080. So $1,080. Now this is what I call a steal because the prior record for this book in a non-restored grade was set back in 2015, way back when, before COVID, before all the spikes related to COVID. It was set back then for a blue label was $5,100. Now this book hasn't really performed that well because the most recent sale for a 6.0 blue label was $3,613 back in April of this year. So that's the most recent sale. So this book is way off its 2015 price value. So really, I don't know why this book has dropped so much, but it really hasn't performed that well. However, this book, even as a restored book, does have some records as well, and some auction history. So there was a copy that sold back in 2021 during the peak of, early peak of COVID, January 2021, for $2,290. That was the record for this book in restored grade. Now the price has really dropped since then. So there was a recent sale in July of this year, so just last month, for $1,320. So this is another $300 off of that price. And yeah, so just a big sale, but one that I think was undervalued, and I might have to fix that. See, my book is about to fall. So then there was a AF-15, is number 4 on my list, which is the Amazing Fantasy 15, which is the first appearance of Spider-Man, Uncle Ben, and Aunt May. And it's his origin story as well. And that's from Marvel from 1962. It's a Stan Lee story and a Jack Kirby cover. Now, I always put this book on the list because it's kind of like, to me, the bellwether of the entire market for the Silver Age. It's the biggest book from the Silver Age. It's the one that everyone knows, and I was curious to watch it. How does it perform from week to week, month to month, so forth? Well, this book was a 2.0 that came up for market, for sale, I should say, and it sold for $21,600. Now, this book had huge records during COVID. It had a record high set in April of 2022 for $40,525. So this is almost half what it was from that COVID rank bump. But here's the good news. The most recent sale before this one, there was 2 sales back in March. There was one for 21,240, and there was another sale in March for $22,200. Now, so this book is kind of in between those 2 sales, and which is good, which is what we want to see, because it means that the book is stabilizing in value. It's sort of hit the floor, and it's kind of now settling into a number. And that's what we want to see. So this is a good sign for this book. I mean, this book is one that actually sells fairly frequently because there's a lot of them on the census. There are 3,774 of these on the census, and 2,459 of them are Universal Blue Labels. So it's just a really interesting book. I always like to keep track of it and see how it performs. The next one on our list is, I'm going to actually probably use this one in the title of this video, because I was a little bit shocked by this one. So this is Avengers #1. Now, Avengers #1 is from 1963. It's the first appearance of the Avengers and their origin story as a team. And we get the original Avengers team was like Thor, Hulk, Captain America, and Ant-Man and the Wasp. So, not Captain America, Iron Man. Iron Man, not Captain America. Iron Man. And, you know, it's the team that we all know from the movies. So this is a Jack Kirby cover and Dick Ayers cover, actually. Both have credits on it. But this was an interesting sale because it really shows you what staples are worth. Because this was a qualified 2.5 that came up for sale. And the only reason it was qualified was the staples were replaced. And it sold for $1,800. So I always wonder, okay, how much do really people put value into those staples? Well, we'll find out with this. Now, the record for Blue Label was set back in November of 2021 for $4,794. The last Blue Label sold for $2,599 in July of 2023, so last month. So, you know, you can see that the Blue Label has really dropped from those COVID peaks, maybe almost half. Now, how did this Green Label perform? Well, strangely enough, the record for the Green Label was set back in August of 2021 for $2,051. So this is down, but it's only down $200. And if you look at it compared to the Blue Label, it's only about $700 off of $800 actually, $800 off of that price. Whereas before, historically, it was selling for about like a little bit less, like about 40%, which is typical. Typical prices for qualified is whatever the price is, take it in half, chop it in half, and that's usually the qualified price. But in this case, this book actually performed quite well. It didn't lose as much value during the COVID, correction, and it actually is performing quite well. It's not, it didn't really lose much value. So very interesting. I was surprised that this qualified label actually outperformed the Blue Label. I thought that was interesting. There are 5,334 of these on the census, and 3,980 of them are Universal Blue Labels. What do you think? How much are staples really worth? So I'd be curious about that one. People's opinions on that. Number 2 on the list, Doctor Strange number 169. Now this is a really interesting book because This is from Marvel from June of 1968. It is the first titled appearance of Doctor Strange in his own title, I should say. And it's also the retelling of his origin story. It's a Don Atkins cover, and it's just a cool cover. I mean, this should have been the cover of the first appearance of Doctor Strange. That would be a much more expensive book. It's just a really great cover. This was a 9.0 that came up for sale, and it sold for $1,080. Now, this is down from the previous record for this book, which was set during COVID, but we got to kind of ignore the COVID bump. Okay, we got to kind of ignore that. The previous record was like $2,022, so this is about half of the COVID bump, which was set in June of 2021. But if you look at the last sale for this book had really tumbled. This is a 9.0, sold for $1,080, right? Well, the most recent sale for this book was set last month for $593. So it had really dropped almost down to like 75%. Now it's gone back up a bit. It's almost doubled from the previous sale. So it's kind of showing some recovery. So it's a good sign for this book. So that's why it's on the list, and because it's doubled in value in the last month. So really, somebody got a bit of a steal back in July. So for $593, I think that was a really great price. That should have been steal of the week for that week, because that was a really great price. There are 3,384 of these on the census, and 3,015 of them are universal blue labels. Okay, number 1 on the list. Now this is an interesting one, because so far all the books that we talked about really haven't had records. They're not like, oh, like these are like the newest record, but this next book is a record, and that's what makes it really especially interesting. This was Johnny Quest number 1. This is from December of 1964. It's a Gold Key comic. It is the first appearance of the whole cast for Johnny Quest. It's the only issue. It wasn't a series. It was just a one-shot. But the story adapted the pilot episode of Johnny Quest, which was a ABC primetime comic cartoon series, I should say. So just a really interesting book, because it was one of those ones where there was a real fan base for Johnny Quest, and they actually tried to bring back the series multiple times, even until just recently. They brought it back in multiple variations. So this was a 9.2 that came up for sale, and it sold for $1,320. So that's a pretty big sale, because the previous record for this book was $960. So this is up $400 from that previous record. When everything else is falling, this one at least did well. Part of the reason why it might not have tumbled as much as some of the other books that are on the list is the prior record was set back in July of 2019. So before there was any COVID effect on comics. So you don't really get that spike that we have to kind of ignore. So this is really up on pace. And that's why I kind of put it on the list, to show you, what if we just ignore 2 years? Just ignore those 2 years, and what would the prices kind of reflect? And what we see is the market is just chugging along as it normally would, and as long as we ignore the COVID bump. Okay. Now, there are actually higher graded copies of this book. The highest graded is actually a 9.6, which has never come up for sale. So we don't know how much that would actually go for. And there's only 5 books that are actually higher grade than this 9.2 on the census. There was a 9.4 sale that sold for $2,640 in February of this year. So this book is a hot book. Yeah, so we got, that's basically it for this book. So yeah, there was only 196, which is interesting, and we haven't seen it sell. So I would imagine if it came up for market, it came up for sale, it would probably go for $5,000 to $6,000. So interesting book. This one, unlike most of the ones that we've seen on the census, most of the book, like all the books that were on this list, had over 1,000 copies on the census, and most Silver Age books in that 2,000 to 3,000 number of books on the census. Well, this one is quite rare. There's only 133 of them on the census, and 131 of them are universal blue labels. So what did you think of this list? Do you have any of these books in your collection? Please put it in the comments below. And thanks again for watching. Hopefully next week we'll get Mark back on the show. And yeah, we'll have some fun. So bye for now. Thanks again for watching.